Hey there, you insightful souls. Ever notice how some people seem to glide through life while others are constantly tripping? It's like they're following a secret map, leaving everyone else wondering if they're missing something crucial. The truth is, it's not about hidden agendas or meticulous planning, but something far more intrinsic. People will watch you and swear you're always 2 steps ahead when really you're just listening to that inner voice that's guiding you. It's wild, right? Everyone else assumes you're burning the midnight oil buried under spreadsheets while you're just chilling, catching vibes they don't even believe in. They're convinced you're scheming when you're actually just feeling. And because they can't grasp it, they whisper things. Let's dive into why everyone's talking about you and how to own the real superpower you've always had: your intuition. First off, they call your moves calculated because they can't wrap their heads around discernment. Period. It's a limitation of language. They're trapped in boxes and all they see are plots and plans. But you're doing something different. You're responding to signals they don't even register. Think about it. You're not playing chess, you're sensing the undercurrents. Discernment isn't about overthinking, it's about seeing. It's picking up on the unspoken feeling, the energy behind the facade, knowing when that shiny open door is actually a trap waiting to spring. Those who only rely on logic need all the flashing red flags before they react. You one is enough, because you trust that inner compass. That's not insider information. You're simply dialed into a frequency they haven't learned to tune into. That's why you walk away from messes before they explode, dodge drama before it unfolds, and seize opportunities at exactly the right moment. It's not strategy, it's sensitivity. You move when you feel that pull, you stop when you feel that check, and you trust it without hesitation. It's like they're stuck in a game they're learning to play while you keep winning without even playing it. Doesn't that strike a chord? You don't need to manipulate, overanalyze, or calculate. You respond to what you deeply know, and it's enough to stay ahead. They can't stand it because they can't categorize it, predict it, or duplicate it. Call it intuition, alignment, whatever feels right, but remember it's discernment. And that's one thing you can't fake. Next, understand this intuition. Looks like strategy to the blind. That's why you're constantly mislabeled. They assume mastery, complexity, and control because they can't see the inner guidance system directing you. They're stuck believing every outcome is the result of hours of planning, predicting, and hard work. But intuition skips the spreadsheets and delivers direction instantly. That clarity can feel almost unfair to those in confusion. They're thrown off by your consistency. You sidestep the potholes, never too early or too late, landing precisely where you need to be. It looks like you've mastered strategy, but you're just tuned in. Intuition bypasses logic's hesitation. It knows. When you act on it, you're precise, sharp, deliberate, even when you didn't intend to be. Others' blindness creates the illusion of scheming because they can't see the signals you're picking up. They think you're foreseeing the future, not realizing you're responding to the present with amplified awareness. You notice the nuances, the hidden tones, the subtle energies they miss. They think you conjured it from thin air. This misunderstanding creates suspicion. They must be manipulative and awe. How do they do that? Either way, they're unsettled because intuition shatters their logic. They're blind to the flow, so they call it strategy. They're deaf to the signals, so they call it luck. It's actually alignment. No need to map every step. Your spirit is already in sync. Walk like that and you'll always look like a strategist to those who can't hear your rhythm. Can you feel that rhythm yourself? Here's a big one. You're not playing games. You're following codes. It's why your life feels so different. Their world revolves around winning, so losing, outsmarting, manipulating. They see life as a constant competition. But you're not tricking, scoring, or proving. You're following codes written into your spirit instincts, truths that shape your actions without a second thought. That's why they're baffled. They swear you're plotting, hiding an agenda when you're just obeying that inner structure telling you what's right, when to go, when to stop. Obedience to those codes creates consistency that seems like mastery. While they're fumbling, you're steady. Because you're not improvising, you're aligned with a system that doesn't fail. And they can't access those codes. They can watch, mimic, study, but the source is internal. Obedience isn't an act, it's a way of life. It creates an authority that no game can match. Their tricks don't work, their manipulations bounce off because you're not playing the same game. You're not reacting to their moves, you're responding to your codes. They can't bait you, distract you, or pull you out of character. They're busy trying to win. You're busy staying aligned. Alignment always wins in the long run, so when they call you calculated or cunning, they're exposing their own blindness. They're too lost in games to see true obedience. What they call strategy is loyalty to the blueprint within, and that will always look like mastery to those stumbling through chaos. Does that resonate with you? Also, they mistake your flow for a formula. They can't accept that you don't need a set of instructions, so they create one for you. They see you showing up at the right moment, avoiding pitfalls, responding with clarity, and they assume you cracked the code. But there is no code. It's flow alignment, something they can't box into steps. That's why they replay your actions, analyze your choices, gossip about your behavior like it's a puzzle. They want to anticipate you, but your flow doesn't come from logic, it comes from spirit. And the spirit moves in rhythms, not rigid lines. You can't be pinned down. One day left, one day right, both correct. No formula. Logic-dependent people can't stand this. They want predictability, math, input, output, cause, effect. They look at you and it feels unfair. Results without formulas, progress without checklists, timing without calculation. It threatens them because if your flow is real, their formulas might not be as powerful as they thought. What makes your flow unshakable is that it's alive. Formulas break, flow adapts. Formulas need perfect conditions, flow bends with the wind and still gets there. They can't decode you, they're chasing consistency in numbers while you're living consistency in alignment. So when they call you calculated, they're revealing their blindness. What they call a formula is surrendering to something bigger. And that current will always take you further than logic ever could. Can you feel this current? Here's another point, intuition doesn't hesitate. It delivers. That's why your actions seem so sharp and intentional. Most people are trapped in a cycle of second guessing. They overthink, doubt, seek endless confirmation. By the time they're convinced it's safe to act, the opportunity is gone. You move when you sense it. You don't let fear or doubt cloud that first whisper. To outsiders, it looks like you planned everything. They see confidence, precision, and assume you rehearsed it all. You didn't. You trusted the first nudge. That whisper needs no debate, validation, or explanation. It just needs obedience. That's premeditated brilliance. They can't understand how you get it right so often. They can't see the invisible choice you make to refuse hesitation. Where they let doubt steer them off course, you let intuition carry you. The difference is obvious. Their steps wobble, yours land firmly. Their moves are cautious, yours bold. What they call strategy is just refusing to let fear take the wheel. Hesitation is the enemy of intuition. You know that. The longer you pause, the weaker the whisper. They silence it by delaying. You act on it while it's fresh. That's why you always seem to arrive right on time. You're not predicting. You're responding to the now with full trust. So when they accuse you of being pre-planned or manipulative, it's because they can't fathom a life without hesitation. You're not sitting on a master plan. You're just honoring the first whisper they keep ignoring. And that simple obedience makes you look untouchable. That strikes a chord, doesn't it? Now consider this: they're offended that you don't stumble. To most, life is trial and error, mistake, recover, try again. That's their rhythm. Because it's all they know, they assume it's the only way. But they see you avoiding traps, not needing to touch the fire to know it burns, not needing 10 failures to see a dead end. You move differently and it offends them. They confuse your navigation with arrogance. In their eyes, you must think you're better because you don't struggle as much as they do. They want to believe you're calculating every move, plotting every decision like a strategist. If it's not calculation, then it must mean something even more uncomfortable. You're simply tuned in. And if you're tuned in, then maybe all their stumbles weren't inevitable. Maybe they just weren't listening. Too heavy for most to accept, so they project. They don't see that avoiding unnecessary stumbling isn't about pride. It's about perception. You don't need to hit every wall to find the doors. You trust the signals they ignore. Subtle warnings, quiet nudges, uneasy feelings saying, "Don't go that way." It doesn't make you perfect. It makes you attentive. Others fall because they're deaf to the cues. The offense comes from your path, making theirs look harder. Watching you bypass obstacles they tripped over makes them feel exposed. Like their struggles weren't just about life being unfair, but about their inability to discern. Instead of humbling themselves to learn, they get resentful. They'd rather accuse you of being sneaky, overly calculated, or lucky than admit you've learned to navigate where they wander blindly. Stumbling is not always necessary for growth. Wisdom means learning without unnecessary bruises. Navigation will always look suspicious to those who can't tell the difference between alignment and luck. What offends them is not that you don't stumble. It's that you remind them they don't have to either. Does that ring true? And let's talk about this. Your silence is a frequency, not a strategy. They think when you pause, don't respond, or pull back, you're plotting. They assume you're being tactical, calculating your next move. What they don't understand is that silence for you isn't about withholding or playing games. It's about tuning in. Your stillness is your way of listening not just to people but to the energy, the atmosphere, and the signals guiding you. This silence confuses and frustrates people. They're used to silence being a weapon, a tool, a passive-aggressive control move. They project that onto you, but your silence isn't about them, it's about staying in alignment. While others fill the air with noise, you wait for the right confirmation to speak or move. That patience is powerful. It keeps you from acting out of impulse. When you finally speak or act, it lands with weight. They can't figure out why your words hit harder, why your choices seem sharper, why you avoid disasters. It's because your silence is a tuning fork. You're not reacting, you're calibrating. You're letting the unnecessary noise fall away so that when you do act, it's aligned with something much stronger than impulse or emotion. Silence in your hands is not emptiness, but clarity. It's not avoidance, but precision. You aren't quiet because you don't know what to say. You're quiet because you know not everything deserves a response. You aren't still because you're afraid to move. You're still because movement without alignment is wasted energy. People who don't understand this will always accuse you of plotting when you're just listening at a depth they've never reached. Silence isn't a strategy from a book, it's a frequency. You've learned that the right pause creates space for truth to surface, and once it does, your response carries an authority that no amount of planning could ever manufacture. Next, remember this. You're walking with a compass they can't steal. They assume that if you succeed or move with precision, there's a hidden manual, a secret advantage, a cheat code. They think if they watch closely, study your moves, or mimic your patterns, they can catch up. They don't understand that your compass isn't external. It's not instructions or a method. It's part of your wiring, spiritual, instinctive, unshakable. That's what makes it impossible to replicate. They can try to mimic your timing, choices, responses, but they'll never get it right. Your compass doesn't respond to logic, fear, or even ambition. It responds to alignment, intuition, and signals beyond their perception. They could follow you step by step and still never truly understand why you move the way you do. Your movement isn't a formula, it's a flow, a current, a rhythm they cannot touch. What frustrates them most is the invisibility of it. They see the results, precision, calm, and chaos, doors opening. But they can't see the source. They can't steal the compass because it isn't physical. It's not in your mind, it's in your spirit. The moment they try to control or replicate it, it shifts, slipping away. You're not playing by their rules, and that unnerves them. This compass also gives you freedom. You don't need their validation, approval, or understanding. You're guided by something greater than circumstance, gossip, or the noise they throw at you. That freedom makes them envious. They can't break it, hack it, or buy it. Your compass is yours alone. It can't be stolen, taught, or copied, and that's why your path will always be ahead of theirs. They might watch, speculate, and accuse, but they'll never catch your current. You move with certainty and grace that is untouchable, and that's exactly what makes you untouchable. Can you feel that? And what about this? Your timing exposes their delay. Every move you make lands exactly when it should. That precision is impossible for most to ignore. They're used to life being messy, opportunities slipping constantly, catching up. So when they watch you act with such exactness, it unsettles them. It feels unnatural, almost suspicious, because they assume no one could consistently move with that accuracy without plotting. What they call manipulation is really something simpler: alignment. You don't force things and you don't rush what isn't ready. You respond to signals, energies, and openings that most people miss. That's why your timing is perfect. It's not about planning or controlling. It's about moving when conditions and intuition converge. While others stumble through hesitation or panic, you step forward calmly. The contrast makes them uneasy because it exposes their inefficiency in decision and constant delays. They can't reconcile how you seem to anticipate life's rhythm without overthinking it. They don't realize that your luck or skill is a result of listening, observing, and trusting the first signal. They're trapped in cycles of doubt and over-analysis, waiting for perfect conditions that never really exist. Meanwhile, you move naturally, guided by a current they can't feel, timing every step to the moment it's meant to land. This irritates them. They see doors closing, chances being taken, opportunities passing them by simply because they hesitated. Your timing doesn't just make you effective, it reveals their delay, their indecision, and their inability to act when it matters most. The reality is your timing isn't about them, it's about your alignment with purpose, intuition, and the signals most miss. While they might mislabel it, it's the effortless result of moving in harmony with what's real, necessary, and right. Every perfectly timed step exposes how far behind they truly are, and that truth unsettles them more than anything else could. Does any of that resonate with you? Moreover, you don't play possibilities, you move in certainties. Most live in a fog of what-ifs, running endless scenarios, weighing options, doubting instincts, questioning steps. They think that's normal. But you don't operate that way. You don't debate possibilities because your intuition delivers clarity that doesn't require deliberation. When you sense the right move, you act and it's final. That decisiveness feels alien to those trapped in hesitation, and it unnerves them. They're used to life being trial and error, every choice carrying risk, every step needing second guessing. They replay situations, imagining outcomes, hedging against failure. You bypass all of that. You trust the first signal, the first whisper, the certainty that arises when your spirit aligns with what is true. That certainty needs no justification, explanation, or validation. You don't act to impress, control, or cover possibilities. You act because you know. What makes them uncomfortable is the contrast. While they hesitate, stumble, and circle back, your actions land cleanly, with impact and with minimal effort. They can't understand how someone could bypass doubt so consistently. To them, every decision requires a checklist, debate, and contingency plan. Watching you act decisively makes them feel exposed, like they're constantly behind, second-guessing themselves, while you move with confidence that seems effortless and untouchable. That rings true, doesn't it? That's why they call you calculated or strategic. They assume someone so decisive must be plotting outcomes and manipulating events. But it isn't strategy. It's alignment. You're not weighing possibilities to see which benefits you most. You're moving according to a certainty they cannot access. That certainty is invisible, instinctive, and unshakable. It allows you to navigate life with a precision that feels supernatural to those stuck in hesitation. In the end, your clarity isn't just effective, it's disruptive. It exposes their indecision, overthinking, and inability to trust themselves. They call it calculated. They call it unnatural. It's simply the way someone moves when they don't play in the realm of possibilities but live entirely in the realm of certainty. Here's a thought: they're angry you don't need blueprints. In their world, success is built like a project: step 1, 2, 3, planned, rehearsed, checked off. They believe the only way to achieve is by mapping, rehearsing, and listing. So when they watch you succeed repeatedly without following their rigid formula, it throws them off. They don't know how to label it, so they assume you must be calculating, scheming, or bending rules. What they call arrogance or cunning is really faith and divine foresight. You don't need scaffolding or rehearsals because you're aligned with something bigger than strategy. Your moves aren't contingent on approval, resources, or conventional methods. You trust the signals guiding you and step into opportunities as they come without forcing them to fit a pre-designed plan. That makes your path appear effortless and inevitable, and to planning-obsessed people, that inevitability feels like an affront. They worked hard, stressed, worried, and here you are, walking through doors they didn't even see coming, doors that only opened because you moved in alignment with timing and purpose, not checklists and blueprints. This angers them because it highlights their limitations. Does that resonate? While they're trying to control outcomes, you're moving naturally with them. Their system, schedules, and preparations feel inadequate because your approach proves that planning isn't the ultimate source of success. They mistake your confidence and clarity for calculation because it's unrelatable. They can't fathom that someone could walk forward without plotting every detail and still land perfectly every time. You don't need a roadmap because your inner compass, your intuition, and your alignment guide you with precision. You move from knowing, not guessing. Your foresight isn't manufactured, it's cultivated from trust, observation, and responsiveness to signals others ignore. That combination allows you to act with certainty in ways they interpret as calculated, even though it isn't. At the core, they're not upset with you. They're unsettled by the reminder that success doesn't require endless blueprints, only discernment, faith, and alignment. That truth, which comes so naturally to you, is impossible for them to replicate or control. You expose the limits of their logic. Every step you take, every decision you make, every success flowing from intuition rather than calculation, quietly dismantles the systems they've built their lives around. They worship logic, reason, and strategy like authorities, convinced that intelligence alone governs outcomes. Then you move effortlessly, guided by instinct, alignment, and perception. And you show them something they're not ready to admit. Intellect, as powerful as it seems, is not the highest authority. That's why they have to label you calculated. It's easier to assume you plotted every move, orchestrated every outcome, and manipulated situations than to face the truth that someone could consistently succeed without following their frameworks. Every intuitive decision you make highlights the blind spots in their so-called expertise. Every perfectly timed action, every opportunity recognized before they see it, every trap avoided before it appears, exposes the boundaries of their understanding. That must resonate, doesn't it? Your alignment with instinct makes their reasoned strategies look slow, clumsy, and insufficient. They see results they can't explain, patterns defying their methods, and outcomes challenging their control. Logic is comfortable because it's predictable, measurable, repeatable. Intuition, on the other hand, is fluid, unpredictable, and untamable. It thrives where logic hesitates, moves where calculation fails, and adapts faster than any plan. That disparity breeds discomfort, frustration, and envy. Every time you act without hesitation, overthinking, or relying on structured reasoning, you prove that true mastery doesn't come from following rules. It comes from recognizing signals, responding to reality, and trusting something deeper. To them, that's terrifying because it implies their devotion to intellect alone is incomplete. They would rather call you calculated, clever, or manipulative than admit their logic has limits. Facing that truth would force them to acknowledge forces and abilities they cannot control or measure. In essence, your intuition doesn't just guide you. It undermines their rigid frameworks and forces them to confront the uncomfortable reality that intelligence is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. And that is why your existence is so unsettling to them. You see, intuition makes you look ruthless. People watch the way you walk away from energy-draining situations, cut ties without guilt, say no without hesitation, and they get uncomfortable. To them, it appears cold, calculated, and even harsh, as if you've weighed every outcome and chosen the one benefiting you most. They don't understand that what looks ruthless is loyalty. Loyalty to your inner knowing, the signals you trust, and the life you refuse to compromise. Where most people spend years trapped in indecision, second-guessing every move, doubting every choice, you move with clarity. You act on the first confirmation that something is right or wrong. That decisiveness doesn't come from malice or strategy. It comes from alignment. You've learned to honor your instincts even when it makes others uncomfortable. That unwavering trust in yourself can be misread as ruthlessness by those who are hesitant, fearful, or indecisive. It unnerves people because they can't predict you. They can't manipulate you, bend you, or wait you out. Their usual tactics, guilt, pressure, persuasion, fail because your decisions aren't based on fear, obligation, or social expectation. You act in accordance with what you know to be true, and that certainty gives your actions a sharpness others interpret as being ruthless. The truth is, you're not ruthless at all. You're uncompromising. You refuse to betray your inner compass for the sake of appearances, approval, or temporary comfort. That integrity looks aggressive to people who rely on hesitation, negotiation, and endless compromise to get through life. Your ability to act decisively and walk away cleanly exposes their indecision and lack of clarity, which only heightens their perception of you as someone harsh or unforgiving. Ultimately, what they call ruthlessness is just a reflection of their discomfort with your alignment. You've learned to act with precision, to trust your first instinct, and to move past anything that doesn't resonate. It's not cruelty, it's mastery of self, and mastery of self always looks intimidating to those who haven't learned to listen to the quiet authority within themselves. Remember, what they call calculation is just you being in rhythm with the unseen. Every step you take, every decision you make, every move that seems too precise or perfectly timed isn't the result of planning or scheming. It comes from something far beyond what others can measure or understand. Your rhythm isn't man-made. It's cosmic. It's aligned with forces, patterns, and currents that most people can't sense. That's why your actions look so deliberate, intentional, and untouchable. They assume it's calculation because they can't see the invisible guidance shaping your every step. People study you endlessly, replaying your movements, trying to decode the method behind your success. They dissect your timing, choices, responses, convinced there must be a blueprint. Meanwhile, you're already 5 steps ahead, not because you've planned it, but because you felt it. Your alignment allows you to respond instantly, decisively, and accurately to situations that leave others confused and scrambling. They see outcomes. You see the currents leading to them. That's the difference. What they call calculation is a manifestation of your ability to sense patterns, energies, and signals that others ignore. While they rely on logic, charts, and rehearsed steps, you move in sync with rhythms that can't be taught or forced. That synchronicity gives the illusion of forethought, but it's not mental manipulation. It's natural attunement. You're not plotting against anyone. You're simply navigating life in harmony with forces they can't perceive. This rhythm gives you an almost untouchable advantage. You don't stumble into obstacles because you sense them before they appear. You don't waste time second-guessing because your moves are guided by certainty, not fear. You don't need to control outcomes because alignment with the unseen always leads you where you need to be. The discomfort others feel comes from their inability to access the same rhythm. They can watch, analyze, and theorize, but they'll never fully grasp how you operate. That's why your presence unsettles them, why your moves intimidate them, and why they feel compelled to label you as calculated. What they call calculation is you living inside divine rhythm, moving with the flow of something greater than themselves and always arriving exactly where you're meant to be. Everything you've seen, every move, every success, every perfectly timed step has one truth running through it. You are guided by something they cannot measure, replicate, or control. What they call calculation, ruthlessness, or strategy is alignment, discernment, and intuition in action. You don't need to overthink, overplan, or follow their rules because your rhythm comes from a source far beyond logic or circumstance. Every step you take exposes their limits, their hesitation, and their misunderstanding of what it means to move with certainty. You operate on a level invisible to them. Your silence, timing, ability to bypass pitfalls, refusal to play in possibilities all mark you as living in alignment with a force they can't comprehend. They can study you, dissect you, even try to predict your next move, but they will always fall short. You move in a current they cannot see, guided by codes they cannot follow, and living in rhythms beyond their reach. What looks calculated to them is mastery of the unseen. The most powerful part, none of it depends on luck, scheming, or manipulation. It depends on trust. In yourself, in your intuition, and in the invisible guidance that constantly navigates you toward what is right, true, and aligned. That trust makes your presence unshakable, your steps untouchable, and your life a blueprint they will never be able to copy. So as they whisper, speculate, and question, you keep moving. Calm, precise, and in rhythm with the unseen. Let them call it what they want. To those who understand, it's clear your alignment is your power, your intuition is your advantage, and your rhythm is unstoppable. You are living proof that when you move in harmony with what cannot be seen, nothing and no one can stand in your way. Now, if this resonated with you and opened your eyes to something deeper, don't just scroll on. Take a moment to consider what's one thing you can do today to honor your own intuition, to trust that inner voice. What one step can you take toward living more in alignment with the unseen? Think about it. Share it with someone. Acknowledge it. Then do it. Because understanding is only the first step. The real magic happens when you take that knowing and live all la marita, la marita, la marita, la marita, la marita. But welcome the trailblazers. Names are not merely echoes, they resonate in halls where your footsteps have yet to fall. Some leave behind legacies, others construct frameworks, but you've left behind a reckoning. And reckonings, unlike accolades, travel at the speed of light. Consider this. Behavioral psychology confirms that humans are inherently drawn to spread negative narratives at triple the rate of positive ones. Now envision yourself as the individual whose triumph is perceived as a looming threat. That is you. Even now, your name is uttered with the gravity of an approaching storm, and the speakers are far from celebratory. Why? Because your achievements transcend mere victory. You've accomplished what seemed insurmountable, dismantling obsolete systems, silencing the self-proclaimed arbiters of access, rewriting ingrained protocols and shattering cycles that have persisted for generations. Instead of skirting the established boundaries, you obliterated them, leaving those accustomed to privilege to confront the fragility of their foundations. The paradox. Many of those who recoil from your influence cannot articulate their unease. They simply remember a time before, a period of unchallenged norms now irrevocably altered. You represent the forbidden button, the one they're warned never to touch, yet they are incapable of looking away. Today we unravel the mystique, why your name now commands respect, why rooms shift when you enter, and why some will never find solace while you continue to innovate and inspire. Prepare yourself. After this, you'll grasp why your very existence has become the unexpected twist they never saw coming. One, you shattered a paradigm that predated your arrival. There's a definitive reason recurring struggles plague families, communities, and even entire civilizations. These are not coincidental misfortunes. They are deeply entrenched patterns reinforced through years, decades, and sometimes centuries of repetition. These patterns endure because previous generations lacked both the conviction and the resilience to confront them directly. Some attempted to break free only to be overwhelmed by the entrenched resistance. Others opted to avoid the conflict altogether, hoping time would somehow diminish its power. It never did. It remained dormant like a slumbering leviathan, awaiting someone bold enough, or desperate enough, to awaken it and bring about its demise. That someone turned out to be you. You didn't enter this fray motivated by fearlessness. You were driven by exhaustion, wearied by the endless cycle of suffering, by the sight of those you cherish succumbing to toxic paradigms, by the pervasive awareness that superficial progress masked a deeply rooted poisonous core. This battle chose you long before you acknowledged it, but unlike others, you didn't retreat. Breaking such a pattern isn't a singular theatrical event. It's a gradual process, a series of resolute decisions made in the face of overwhelming opposition. It's uttering no when conformity demands a yes. It's severing ties deemed sacrosanct. It's being branded ungrateful, rebellious, difficult, even delusional for daring to reject the inherited burdens passed down as family heirlooms. And the cruelest aspect, this transformation is often accomplished in silence devoid of external validation because those comfortable with the status quo rarely applaud the one who disrupts it. The magnitude of your accomplishment lies not just in the act itself, but in the reverberations it creates. When you finally vanquish that pattern, you not only liberate yourself, but you also alter the destinies of all those who follow. They may never fully appreciate the sacrifices you made to enable their different lives, but your adversaries certainly do. That's why your name carries such weight. Your victory transcends the personal. You closed a door they believed would remain perpetually open. Now when your name is spoken, it's not with indifference. It's laden with significance because you demonstrated that even the most ancient intractable forms of oppression can be overcome. And you were the catalyst for their end. 2, you transformed the unattainable into the expected. Many individuals are paralyzed by perceived limitations, convinced that certain ambitions are simply beyond their reach. They hear these self-limiting beliefs echoed by family, society, and their own internal voices until they accept them as immutable facts. This is how limitations endure, not because they are inherent truths, but because they are perpetually reinforced. You did not just hear those constraints. You were nurtured in an environment saturated with them. You were intimately familiar with the script expected to enact your predetermined role, and yet you vehemently refused. Your narrative distinguishes itself because your aim wasn't merely to prove a point, but to live authentically, even if it meant shattering every unspoken convention. You pursued goals labeled as unreachable, unthinkable, too ambitious for someone of your background or circumstance. Initially, you were likely dismissed as naive. Perhaps you were even ridiculed, your inevitable failure eagerly anticipated. But as you progressed, they were forced to confront an unsettling reality: you were succeeding. And when you ultimately achieved what they swore was impossible, it didn't just transform your own existence. It destabilized the mental prisons people had constructed for themselves. You elevated the impossible to a new benchmark. This is the true source of discomfort. It's one thing to achieve personal success. It's entirely another to do so in such a spectacular fashion that others are compelled to reevaluate their own self-imposed limitations. You didn't just cross a finish line. You redesigned the entire landscape. This is why your success provokes resistance in some. It's not simply envy. It's the unsettling realization that the very walls they've relied upon for stability were in fact illusory. Your victory serves as irrefutable proof that they could have striven harder, aimed higher, but they didn't, and now they cannot ignore that truth. Your adversaries don't merely fear your abilities. They fear the ripple effect you've initiated, because once others witness what is truly possible, the convenient excuse of "that's just how things are" loses its potency. And when that excuse crumbles, control structures begin to collapse. This is the silent revolution your accomplishments have ignited. You didn't merely alter your own life. You transformed the narrative for everyone watching. And those who profited from maintaining those limitations are acutely aware of it. That's why your name now resonates with disruption, why it will never be uttered without intention again. 3. You seize territory without seeking validation. Many dedicate their lives waiting for an invitation, a sign of approval, or a formal acknowledgement before venturing into new spheres. They believe advancement is contingent upon the consent of those in positions of authority. You rejected this premise. You didn't await authorization. You didn't squander precious years knocking on doors never intended to open for you. Instead, you forged your own path, and when a clear trajectory was lacking, you constructed one. This audacity alone startled many. Gatekeepers thrive on the premise that access is a privilege they alone can bestow. Their influence is predicated on the belief that they hold the keys. Yet you circumvented their barriers entirely, demonstrating that these so-called obstacles were merely illusions for those who lacked the audacity to challenge them. In that moment, you exposed their authority for what it truly was: self-appointed, fragile, and dependent on the acquiescence of others. The reaction was predictable. They attempted to discredit you. They resorted to smear campaigns. They even feigned moral outrage, implying that you violated some unwritten law by encroaching upon their designated territory. But the fundamental truth is this: no one possesses exclusive rights to opportunity. No one has the authority to declare themselves the sole gateway to progress, and yet you demonstrated that the only permission one truly requires is their own. Your independence became a contagious force. As more individuals witnessed your success without relying on external validation, they began to question why they had been waiting in line for so long. You didn't merely disrupt their control, you undermined their entire system of power. That's why your name isn't simply remembered. It's discussed with undertones of caution. The underlying fear isn't that you succeeded, but that you succeeded independently of them. You made it irrevocably clear that individuals need not adhere to their established rules to achieve victory. They can construct their own platforms, define their own metrics, and still emerge triumphant. And for those whose identities are intertwined with their roles as gatekeepers, your very existence serves as undeniable proof that they were never the sole conduit to success. This truth is irreversible. It's why the sound of your name now feels like a fissure in the foundation of their carefully constructed world. 4. You transformed their weapons into your arsenal. The most transformative thing you did was take the very strategies devised to break you and invert their purpose entirely. Every tactic, deceit, and manipulation hurled in your direction became a blueprint for your ascension. Where they intended to inflict wounds, you extracted knowledge. Where they sought to sow confusion, you cultivated clarity. Every betrayal was meticulously dissected, every attack analyzed, every attempt to diminish you became a profound lesson in the inner workings of the system and how to master it with unparalleled precision. Their objective was to witness your downfall, and in attempting to crush you, they inadvertently supplied the raw materials for your ultimate triumph. Their insults, gossip, and machinations became invaluable case studies. You didn't just endure the chaos, they inadvertently taught you the rules of their game, which you then rewrote entirely. Suddenly, the forces intended to be your undoing became the very foundation upon which you built your platform. Even their mockery served your purpose. Their derision drew attention to your name, your ideas, your actions, whether they realized it or not. People began to take notice of the individual being actively discredited, and your visibility increased exponentially. Each attempt to bury you ultimately elevated you. And the irony was not lost on either you or anyone paying close attention. By seizing what they intended to destroy you and transforming it into your competitive advantage, you rendered yourself impervious in ways they could never have foreseen. They expended their energy on attacking while you invested yours in learning, adapting, and building. Their own power became the fuel for your meteoric rise. Their animosity became the bedrock of your resilience, and their conspiracies against you became the roadmap for your victories. In the end, the very individuals who plotted your demise unknowingly handed you the precise elements you needed to dominate. They transformed their own weapons into your indispensable tools. And that is why your name now commands attention. You didn't simply survive their attacks. You transmuted them into the instruments of your relentless momentum. Every maneuver they made to inflict harm was inverted, redirected, and amplified into a force that propelled you to heights beyond their wildest imaginings. 5. You introduced veracity into realms where it was outlawed. Your contributions transcend mere truth-telling. You carried it into environments where falsehoods were the norm and silence was the expected protocol. Every institution, every sphere of influence, every social circle that normalized denial felt the undeniable weight of your presence. Individuals had grown comfortable within their illusions, assuming their self-constructed narratives would never be challenged. Then you arrived and the carefully constructed walls of deception began to crumble. Your pronouncements weren't about confrontation for personal gratification. They were about establishing clarity. You forced clarity into places that had actively banished it. Where individuals had been conditioned to disregard, dismiss, or rewrite reality, you presented it with unwavering conviction, and that unnerved people not because the truth was inherently unpleasant, but because it exposed their willingness to exist in a state of perpetual avoidance. Your unwavering commitment to honesty didn't just illuminate, it destabilized. Those who had thrived on self-deception were now compelled to confront the reality they had been diligently evading. Some attempted to resist, clinging to their comforting illusions. But the more you persisted, the more untenable their position became. You rendered their fabricated comfort unbearable, thereby reshaping the very environment. Spaces that had previously tolerated lies were now forced to contend with integrity, and it could no longer be ignored. Your contribution wasn't mere polite discourse, it was accountability. You compelled people to confront themselves, their actions, and their choices in a light they were ill-prepared for. And that's why some cannot tolerate being in your proximity. You didn't threaten them with malice, you threatened them with reality. Your presence compels alignment with truth, which renders dishonesty intolerable. By venturing into environments where truth had been exiled, you didn't just disrupt entrenched patterns. You redefined the realm of possibility. You demonstrated that denial is potent only if left unchallenged, and you challenged it relentlessly. Now those who formerly relied on falsehoods for security are forced to grapple with a clarity they cannot escape. Your impact transcends mere truth-telling. You rendered it unstoppable. 6. You exposed the fragility of their perceived omnipotence. They devoted years, sometimes decades, to cultivating an image of invincibility. Every utterance, every action, every public display was meticulously orchestrated to project unwavering control, dominance, and authority. To the external world, their power seemed unbreakable. Yet it was all a facade, a carefully constructed illusion sustained by fear, manipulation, and the assumption that their authority would never be contested. You didn't just contest it, you shattered it. It didn't require a grand confrontation or a public spectacle. A single decisive action, a refusal to adhere to their predetermined rules, initiated the unraveling of their illusion. You revealed the fundamental truth that their authority wasn't rooted in genuine strength, but in perception. The control they believed was unbreakable wasn't anchored in real power. It was sustained by the belief that others would instinctively yield, comply, and remain silent. You refused to conform. The fragility of their power became apparent the instant their defenses failed to intimidate you. Every tactic designed to maintain their dominance backfired because you saw through it and acted with unwavering conviction. The empire they had built on fear wasn't a fortress. It was a house of cards, and your courage precipitated its collapse. And once the illusion shattered, the repercussions were devastating for them. Their confidence wavered. Their sense of security evaporated, and they were haunted by unease. They realized they had underestimated not only you, but the very essence of genuine power. Real strength doesn't rely on intimidation. It relies on unwavering consistency, unimpeachable integrity, and remarkable resilience. You embodied all three, and by doing so, you exposed just how shallow their foundations were. From that moment forward, your name carried significant weight because it served as a reminder that the emperor possessed no clothes. They were forced to confront the reality that dominance predicated on fear is ephemeral, and that true influence stems from substance, not spectacle. You didn't just survive their empire, you exposed its hollowness, and now everyone, including them, knows it. 7. You compelled them to compete with integrity for the first time. For years, they operated within a system that guaranteed their victories. Rules were optional, to be bent at their convenience. Truth was negotiable, a mere bargaining chip to gain an advantage. Winning wasn't about skill, it was about manipulation, deception, and seizing every possible shortcut. That was the game they had mastered, and those around them had accepted it as the status quo. Then you arrived, and nothing functioned as they expected. You didn't exploit shortcuts or compromise your principles to emulate their tactics. You approached every challenge fully prepared, acutely aware, and firmly grounded in your own integrity. Suddenly, the advantages they had grown accustomed to vanished. Every lie, every deception, every manipulation they relied on was rendered useless against you. Your presence demanded fairness, and fairness terrified them. For the first time, they were forced to compete on equal terms, and the outcome was brutally honest. Their skills alone were insufficient. What they had mistaken for power crumbled because they had never measured themselves against someone who played by the rules of honesty. You exposed a reality they could no longer ignore. Their victories were never legitimate. They were mere illusions. And when they were forced to engage in genuine competition, their shortcomings became undeniable. Your victory transcended the personal. You established a new standard for authentic success. They were ill-equipped to deal with someone who could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast them without resorting to underhanded tactics. Every effort they made to regain control only amplified their inadequacies. Your mastery stemmed not just from your skills, but from your unwavering commitment to integrity. Your ability to maintain clarity while they desperately scrambled. By compelling them into a fair contest, you exposed the emptiness of their previous triumphs and redefined the parameters of engagement. They were now forced to confront themselves, and it caused them profound discomfort. They could no longer rely on shortcuts, and that realization unsettled them more than any defeat ever could. You didn't just secure a victory. They were compelled to acknowledge the standards you established, and that acknowledgement alone shifted the balance of power in ways they are still grappling with. 8. You achieved what they deemed impossible without sacrificing your own values. They have spent their lives convincing themselves that ruthlessness, manipulation, and the compromise of any potentially inconvenient principle are the only paths to success. To them, power demands ruthlessness, and morality is a luxury afforded only to the weak. That's why they could never comprehend you. They assumed that reaching your level would necessitate mirroring their behavior, sacrificing your integrity along the way, but you resisted that temptation. You navigated challenges, surmounted obstacles, and achieved victories without trading your soul for status. You didn't deceive, manipulate, or distort your values to conform to their standards. You succeeded through deliberate action, unwavering discipline, and fierce dedication to your true self, and that is the source of their profound disquiet. They anticipated you bending or breaking, but you defied their expectations. You demonstrated that excellence, influence, and authentic achievement do not require compromise. That's why your success is so disconcerting to them. It's not merely that you triumphed, but that you did so on terms they are incapable of replicating without confronting the moral compromises they have been diligently avoiding. Every rationalization they have ever employed. You have to be ruthless. You have to be cold. You cannot survive otherwise collapses in the face of your living example. Your victory compels them to acknowledge that their narrative about power and success was never absolute. It was simply self-serving, and they are loath to admit it. They cannot concede that you achieved what they believed was impossible without losing yourself, because that would require honest introspection about their own choices. Your triumph exposes the emptiness behind the walls they have constructed, and that's the root of their resentment. Every success you claim serves as a mirror reflecting everything they are unwilling to confront. Your win was not just a victory. They were unaware the game could be played with such integrity. By maintaining your integrity while surpassing them, you redefine the meaning of strength, influence, and genuine victory. Your path not only challenges them, it shames the shortcuts and moral compromises they have relied on for so long. You did not emulate them, and that is the most difficult truth for them to accept. 9. You ended an era of perceived untouchability. For years, certain individuals, factions, and institutions have operated as if exempt from the rules that govern everyone else. They navigated life with an implicit assumption that accountability was a concept reserved for others. Their inflated confidence, their unyielding arrogance, and the atmosphere of intimidation they cultivated were all predicated on the notion that no one could challenge them without incurring a severe penalty. This created a bubble around them, shielding them from scrutiny, criticism, and consequences. Then you arrived. You sought no permission. You engaged in no negotiations for access, and you did not tiptoe around their dominance. You entered the fray with clarity, courage, and a resolute purpose, and the untouchable were subjected to the illuminating power of truth. For the first time, their power was tested by someone who refused to be intimidated. The result was undeniable. Even those who had convinced themselves of their invulnerability realized that vulnerability is a universal human experience. Your actions didn't just reveal weaknesses, they altered the entire perception of authority. Those who had relied on fear and untouchability as shields could no longer hide behind them. Your actions triggered a chain reaction. Individuals in positions of false security began questioning their own invincibility. Systems that had previously operated unchallenged were now under intense scrutiny, and the balance of power began to shift as you demonstrated that no one is immune to consequences. This ripple effect continues to spread. Individuals who once considered themselves untouchable are now cautious, calculating, and uncertain. The fear they once inspired has been replaced by an awareness of their own fragility. You didn't just dismantle the dominance of one individual. You undermined an entire culture of assumed invulnerability. That's why your presence continues to generate waves. You brought an end to an era in which arrogance and position could shield wrongdoing. You demonstrated that accountability knows no exceptions, and that even the seemingly invincible can be held accountable to the truth. Your actions resonated far beyond those who underestimated you. They transmitted a message across systems, groups, and networks that no one's position is guaranteed and no shield is impenetrable. Your victory was not just a personal one. You fundamentally altered the landscape for everyone. 10. You transformed their silence into your spotlight. They believed that ignoring you would effectively erase you. They assumed that by refusing to acknowledge your accomplishments, they could diminish your presence, render you invisible, and ultimately make you irrelevant. Their strategy was to weaponize silence, to employ omission as a shield. However, they failed to comprehend that silence has a peculiar way of attracting attention, particularly when someone refuses to cower within its shadows. Every time they turned their backs, the world took notice. People started questioning the lack of recognition, the subtle avoidance, and the gaps in the narrative they were attempting to control. Their silence didn't conceal you. It amplified your presence. It made your accomplishments, your work, and your influence impossible to disregard. People were naturally prompted to ask, why aren't they acknowledging this? Why is this being deliberately omitted? And in that very curiosity, your visibility soared. Ironically, their attempt to diminish you became the catalyst for your meteoric rise. Their deliberate avoidance served as a signal to anyone paying attention. Something extraordinary is happening here, something that cannot be contained by their indifference. Their omissions became markers of your profound impact. People began noticing not just what you were doing, but the fact that others felt intimidated or threatened enough to suppress it. This tension elevated your value without any need for self-promotion. So there you have it, you, the trailblazer, the paradigm shifter, the one who dared to rewrite the rules. Your journey hasn't been easy, but you've proven that breaking cycles, transforming the impossible, and seizing your own power, all while staying true to your values, creates a legacy that resonates far beyond your immediate sphere. You've shown the world that perceived untouchability is a myth, and that even silence can be transformed into a spotlight. Ultimately, you've become a beacon of what's possible when courage meets conviction. Now I'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you the most? Do you have a personal experience that echoes any of these points, or maybe you have a question you'd like to ask? Jump down to the comments below and let's get the conversation going. And if this message inspired you, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future explorations of how to navigate a world that's constantly evolving. Let's continue this journey of empowerment and transformation together. Welcome, dearly beloved, those touched by grace. The most formidable presence in any space is the one who possesses knowledge yet patiently allows the charade to continue. Have you ever witnessed someone weaving a tapestry of lies with unwavering conviction while you held your tongue, observing how elaborate their fabricated narrative would become? This isn't mere confusion, it's calculated strategy, a spiritual game of chess. And chosen one, you've likely anticipated their moves 10 steps ahead. A compelling truth from psychological studies reveals that over 90% of communication transcends verbal expression, implying that while individuals attempt to conceal secrets with words, their very essence inadvertently reveals the truth, and the secret is out. You were fluent in deciphering those unspoken confessions. They assumed they were cunning, that you were unsuspecting. The irony. You were the silent observer, meticulously recording every detail within your spirit, feigning ignorance of their carefully constructed performance. And now they are unsettled. They are engaged in frantic mental calculations, attempting to decipher how you connected insights they didn't even realize existed. You had no need to solicit answers or demand explanations because you already possessed the truth. Not through intrusion or espionage, but through discernment, your inherent gift. Intuition serves as your internal compass, and divine insight is your superpower. This is not simply another narrative of perceived deception. It transcends that. This embodies spiritual perception, They believed they were manipulating you while you diligently studied their behavioral patterns, their energy fluctuations, and the intricate nuances of their falsehoods. Now they are not only shocked, they are consumed with paranoia, questioning the duration of your knowledge, the recipients of your shared insights, and the actions you intend to take with the truth. Prepare yourself, because in this discourse we will unveil the origin of your uncanny accuracy, which has left them in awe, and illuminate why feigning ignorance was the most strategic decision you ever made. And if you've ever pretended to be surprised simply to safeguard your tranquility, then this is especially for you. First, you refrained from asking questions because you were focused on discerning motives, not merely absorbing stories. You seldom posed excessive questions because deep within you weren't seeking to hear their rendition of events. You were vigilantly observing the underlying motivation propelling their words. You were never interested in surface-level trivialities. What truly captivated your attention was the underlying reason for their disclosures, the information they withheld, and the energetic signals emanating from them as they spoke. While many become entangled in the spoken words, you remained attuned to the pauses, the hesitations, the subtle shifts in their gaze. You inherently understood that words could deceive, but energy never could. Therefore, rather than confronting every dubious detail or pursuing the elusive truth, you allowed them to speak freely. You fostered an environment of ease. You permitted them to believe they had ensnared you within their narrative, when in reality you were methodically gathering data. You were mentally cataloging every inconsistency, every contradiction, every peculiar reaction they exhibited when the topic strayed too close to the truth. You had no need to interrupt them. You allowed them to incriminate themselves with their own utterances, silently, calmly, patiently. They mistook your silence for ignorance, but it signified your attentiveness, your understanding, your willingness to allow the truth to emerge organically. You didn't arrive at conclusions through paranoia. You identified the warning signs. You simply chose not to reveal your awareness prematurely. That level of self-control frightened them because in retrospect they realized you never genuinely questioned them because you already knew the answers. They simply hadn't articulated them aloud, and that is what is currently baffling them. That while they were acting, performing, and attempting to manipulate the narrative, you remained fully aware throughout. Your inquiries were never intended to gather information. They were designed as subtle assessments. You didn't require clarity because you possessed discernment. You weren't seeking facts. You were deciphering the spiritual subtext. Now they are revisiting every conversation, recognizing how exposed they truly were. And it haunts them because they weren't deceiving someone oblivious. They were performing for someone who had already memorized the script. You never needed to pose the perfect question to elicit the truth. You simply needed to remain composed long enough for them to betray themselves, which they did repeatedly without even realizing it. Second, you allowed them to fabricate stories because you needed to assess the extent of their deception. You knowingly allowed them to lie to you not because you were naive, not because you were oblivious, but because you sought to understand the depths of their depravity. You needed to comprehend the full spectrum of their character, not solely the facade they present when striving to appear respectable. And nothing exposes an individual more swiftly than granting them the freedom to lie while you feign ignorance. You weren't caught off guard. You recognized the lie as soon as it left their lips. You simply didn't react. You allowed them to believe they were succeeding in their deception. You observed them constructing a growing edifice of falsehoods, unaware that you were meticulously documenting their actions. Not through physical records, but through spiritual impressions. You were creating mental snapshots, identifying patterns, and connecting disparate pieces of information. You weren't emotionally wounded by the lie. You were disheartened by their ease in deceiving you while looking you directly in the eye. But that disappointment was necessary. You needed to know the truth of their character when they believed you weren't paying attention. That is why you didn't interrupt. That is why you didn't confront them immediately, because catching them in a lie wouldn't have revealed their full potential for deception. Allowing them to lie without resistance did. You were studying the profundity of their deceit. You weren't simply catching them in the act. You were witnessing them build a world constructed upon falsehoods with complete assurance. What they failed to consider was your training for this very scenario. Life had taught you how to interpret silence, how to detect tension, how to recognize the precise moment someone's eyes betray their inner turmoil. They mistook your kindness for ignorance. They were unaware that you had been raised amidst manipulators. As a result, you became fluent in the language of lies long ago. You simply chose to no longer speak it. Now the truth is revealed and they are stunned. They cannot fathom that you were aware all along, but that is the most painful realization for them. Not their act of lying, but that you allowed them to lie and still retained your power. You didn't expose them according to their schedule. You waited until they had inflicted significant damage upon themselves, and now there is no recovery from it. You knowingly allowed them to walk into their own traps, smiling. Third, they failed to realize you were engaged in spiritual eavesdropping. They didn't realize you were spiritually eavesdropping throughout. While they engaged in clandestine discussions behind closed doors, whispered their schemes, and spoke ill of you in private, your spirit had already intercepted everything. That is the factor they overlooked. They believed that if they spoke where you couldn't physically hear them, you would remain unaware. However, they forgot one crucial element: you operate beyond the physical realm. You hear in the spirit. You interpret the atmosphere. You sense the temperature of a room fluctuate when your name is mentioned in your absence. Your accuracy didn't stem from guesswork. It wasn't intuition as most people perceive it. You weren't connecting dots. The truth was being delivered directly to your spirit like divine correspondence. God was revealing information. Your dreams were providing you with details. Your spirit would experience discomfort in the presence of certain individuals before your mind could even comprehend why. And now it becomes clear why some people suddenly began acting strangely, withdrawing or altering their energy around you. You didn't physically witness their conversations, but you felt the essence of their words. You perceived their intentions even before they verbalized them. That is what startled them, because you began responding to actions they hadn't yet admitted to performing. You began disengaging without possessing concrete evidence. You shifted your energy without any direct confrontation. They couldn't understand how you knew. They never imagined that your source wasn't human. It was divine. They underestimated the closeness of God's presence in your life. They assumed that if they remained silent in your presence, they were safe, but your spirit could access realms they were unaware you had access to. And now they are uneasy. They are questioning what else you know. They are reconsidering every conversation they've had, wondering if any information slipped out inadvertently. But nothing escaped their control. You simply possess the ability to see. You simply possess knowledge, not because someone disclosed it to you, but because your gift exposes truths that were never meant to remain hidden. They were so intent on blocking your ears, they forgot that you don't require physical hearing. You hear with your soul. You hear with your inner knowing. And now they realize that you didn't need to be physically present to comprehend their words. You were always 2 realms ahead. Fourth, your composure was a trap they unknowingly entered. Your composure was the setup, and they walked directly into it. They mistook your silence for ignorance, your tranquility for vulnerability. They assumed that because you didn't react, you were unaware, but that was the deception. You weren't perplexed. You were observing. You weren't paralyzed. You were calculating. Each time they believed they were succeeding in their deception, you were one step closer to confirming your initial suspicions. Individuals of that nature only comprehend chaos. They anticipate retaliation, confrontation, or public exposure. Therefore, when you denied them any of those responses, they assumed you were oblivious to the true nature of events. But the truth is, your silence was your form of surveillance. You weren't disengaged. You were meticulously storing every word, every nuance, every contradiction within your spirit. Your composure didn't stem from uncertainty. It arose from a prior decision and an understanding that timing was crucial. They believed they were safe because you smiled, because you remained silent, because you continued to demonstrate grace and stillness. But each time you occupied that silence, you were affording them greater opportunity to reveal their true selves. You didn't need to chase the truth. You allowed it to unfold organically, as it inevitably does when someone feels comfortable behaving recklessly in the presence of someone they deem too naive to notice. They underestimated you because you weren't ostentatious. They didn't realize that your power resided in your apparent indifference, but deep within you were far removed from the drama. You had already recognized the betrayal. You had already seen through the insincere support. You were simply allowing them to continue digging, not out of spite, but because some individuals will remain unconvinced until they are buried beneath the weight of their own lies. Now they are mired in the wreckage, baffled by the rapidity of their downfall. But the truth is, you foresaw it all along. You simply didn't panic. You allowed peace to guide your actions. You allowed stillness to conceal you in plain sight. And now that the storm has subsided, they are left speechless, not merely because you were aware, but because you remained unfazed as they walked directly into the trap they had intended for you. Fifth, Your accuracy offends them because it exposes their entire constructed identity. Your accuracy offends them because it transcends the mere identification of a mistake. It completely removes their mask. You didn't simply detect an oversight. You didn't merely uncover a concealed truth. What you witnessed was the entirety of their performance, the persona they cultivated, the image they projected, the intricate web of lies they relied upon for social, emotional, and even spiritual survival. And with a single moment of quiet precision, you shattered it all with your clarity. They weren't simply living a lie, they were the embodiment of the lie. Their entire identity was meticulously crafted to impress, manipulate, or conceal. Therefore, when your insight pierced through that facade, it didn't simply bruise their ego. It exposed the emptiness of their contrived existence. Your gift didn't merely uncover something trivial. It exposed the entire system they utilized to function. A system of pretense, of performance, of controlling the perceptions of others. They are not simply angered that you knew. They are disturbed that you could perceive them without being explicitly informed, because if you could see it, who else will? If you deconstructed it so effortlessly, how fragile was it to begin with? That is where fear arises. You didn't merely ruin a story. You dismantled a false identity they had depended on for years. And that level of exposure feels akin to death for someone who based their self-worth on illusion. They assumed they had the advantage. They believed they controlled the narrative, but when you spoke, when you revealed even a fraction of your understanding, it shook them because your discernment penetrated directly to their core. It didn't challenge specifics. It confronted their essence, and that is something they cannot defend. Now they are uneasy in your presence, not because you have caused them harm, but because they can no longer maintain their pretense. You have become the mirror that reflects the aspects of themselves they attempt to conceal from the world and from themselves. You didn't attempt to ruin them. You didn't even attempt to expose them publicly, but your truth alone rendered their false reality unsustainable. Your accuracy is menacing not because it is violent, but because it is undeniable. And now they are scrambling not merely to recover, but to reconstruct something that was never real. Sixth, they believed you required evidence, but you were the evidence. They assumed you needed definitive proof, such as text messages, screenshots, or a witness to corroborate your intuition, but you never needed any of that because you were the evidence. The instant your energy shifted, the instant you withdrew, the instant you ceased engaging with their performance, that was the indication that something was amiss. You didn't argue. You didn't plead for truth. You simply aligned yourself with the information your spirit had already conveyed, and that was sufficient. What they failed to comprehend is that your knowing doesn't arise from speculation or doubt. It isn't paranoia. It isn't excessive analysis. It is divine clarity. Your spirit was aware before your mind could even articulate it. You weren't awaiting external validation. You were the confirmation, the alteration in your energy, your changed demeanor, the sudden silence they sensed from you. That was your response. You didn't proclaim it, you embodied it. They anticipated that you would fight for validation. They assumed you would investigate, expose, and attempt to convince others of what was occurring, but you didn't need to. Because when you embody truth, you don't pursue evidence. You are the disruption. Your tranquility amidst the chaos caused them to question everything. Your stillness was more resounding than any evidence they believed you lacked. They assumed they had succeeded in their deception because you didn't react in the manner they expected, but what they overlooked was that you weren't paralyzed. You were simply certain. You were so grounded in the information your spirit had revealed that you felt no need to dispute it. You felt no need to substantiate it. Your detachment was the most resounding declaration they could have received. Now they are spiraling not because you exposed them, but because they realize your composure wasn't due to confusion. It was confirmation. The fact that you are no longer available to them, no longer perpetuating the lie, no longer mirroring their facade, that alone is your evidence, and it is irrefutable. You didn't need to catch them in the act. You didn't require anyone else to confirm what had transpired. The truth resided within your being before it manifested in your reality, and now they are left with a chilling realization: the one individual they attempted to deceive never required proof because you possessed the truth all along. Seventh, they are not merely shocked that you knew. They are fearful of what else you perceive. They are not simply surprised that you discovered their deception. They are genuinely afraid now, because if you detected that, what else have you perceived? What else do you know that you are withholding? That is what haunts them. It isn't solely the fact that you were correct. It is the unsettling silence you maintain after being proven right. They anticipated a confrontation. They anticipated noise, but you offered them none of that, and that is what is causing them to unravel. They are engaged in mental gymnastics, revisiting every interaction, replaying every falsehood, scrutinizing every instance where they lowered their defenses around you, wondering if you observed more than you revealed. And deep down, they recognize that you did, because you have always possessed exceptional clarity, comprehended situations swiftly, and responded with remarkable composure. They cannot help but wonder, what do you really know? The fact that you haven't disclosed everything exacerbates their unease, because now they are not merely grappling with guilt. They are living in fear of future revelations. Your silence has become their paranoia. You didn't expose them, you didn't retaliate, but your very presence is eliciting an inexplicable response. It is unsettling, it is oppressive. It feels as though they have been seen and cannot undo it. You didn't merely make them nervous. You have heightened their awareness because you possess a degree of insight that compels individuals to question their own deceptions. You navigate with a level of knowing that requires no validation, and that is terrifying to someone who relies on manipulation for survival. You are a threat not because of your loudness, but because of your accuracy, and more disturbingly, your quiet accuracy. They underestimated you once. They won't repeat that mistake. Now each time you glance at them, they wonder what you are perceiving. Each time you speak, they contemplate whether there is a hidden meaning. And each time you remain silent, they speculate whether that is the moment you choose to withhold something. Again, your awareness has altered the power dynamics. They no longer control the narrative. You do. And even though you are not weaponizing your knowledge, the mere possibility that you could is what keeps them awake at night. Your presence has become a reminder that nothing concealed remains hidden indefinitely, not when someone like you is present. Eighth, they confessed without conscious awareness. You were interpreting their subconscious throughout. They confessed without even realizing it, and that is what is currently perplexing them. While they believed they were maintaining their composure, smiling, conversing, and feigning normalcy, you were detecting every minor shift, every micro-expression, every instance where their eyes faltered or their energy wavered. They were unaware that their body was revealing the truth their mouth attempted to conceal. You weren't solely listening to their words. You were observing the inconsistencies between their statements and their delivery. You were never deceived by polished phrases or rehearsed narratives. You were attuned to the spaces between their sentences, the tension in their jaw, the flicker in their eye, the insincere laughter that occurred a fraction of a second too late. That is what revealed everything to you. Their nervous habits betrayed them. Their tendency to over-explain or evade direct questions revealed more than any confession could have. They assumed they were being cunning, but you were already 10 steps ahead, deciphering their intentions in real time. People often forget that the body never lies. The subconscious invariably leaks the truth, and you have trained yourself consciously or spiritually to interpret that language. While they were exerting effort to perform, you were locked onto their patterns, detecting the subtle cracks in their facade. They were unaware that every hesitation served as a highlight. Every insincere smile represented a warning sign. Every contradiction allowed you to observe the rearrangement of puzzle pieces. Now they are nervous, they are unsure of what precisely betrayed them, but they sense that you know, and the reason they feel that way is that deep down they recognize they weren't entirely composed around you. They recognize that something slipped. They are simply unable to pinpoint how or when. That is why your presence now unsettles them. You don't need to utter a word. They feel exposed simply by standing near you. You weren't interpreting their story. You were interpreting their soul. That is the distinction. You didn't need confessions. You didn't need them to admit anything. They confessed with their posture, their tone, with every minor detail they assumed you wouldn't perceive. But you did all of it. And now they recognize that you were never deceived. You simply remained silent as they incriminated themselves piece by piece. Ninth, you allowed them to believe they were deceiving you because you needed them to reveal their ultimate strategy. You allowed them to believe they were succeeding in their deception. You could have intervened early, could have severed ties the moment you sensed that initial red flag, but you refrained not out of blindness, but out of observation. You were fully aware of the unfolding events, but you chose not to disrupt the performance prematurely. You needed to see how far they were willing to go. You needed to comprehend their ultimate objective, because that is where the genuine truth resides. You provided them with the space to perpetuate their falsehoods. You made it effortless. You smiled. You nodded. You played along sufficiently to maintain their sense of ease within their deception. Why? Because individuals become careless when they believe they are winning. They cease to conceal their intentions as meticulously. They reveal more of their hand, and that is precisely what you awaited. The moment they exposed not only their tactics, but also their true motives. The ultimate strategy invariably reveals the true purpose of the game. They assumed your silence signified confusion, but you were not confused. You were calculating, you were mapping patterns. You were observing their behavior when they believed you were emotionally invested. And as painful as it was, you possessed the patience to allow the scenario to unfold because superficial betrayal is easily detectable, but you were seeking something deeper. You needed to understand their true nature when they believed they had you completely under their control. The moment they executed their final move, the one they believed would break you, that was when you perceived everything with clarity. Not only their actions, but also why they acted in that manner. Their facade crumbled not because you forcibly removed it, but because their confidence in your silence led them to remove it themselves. And when it fell there, it was the truth in its entirety. No pretense, no backtracking, simply raw intention staring directly at you. Now they are shocked because the individual they believed they were deceiving was 3 steps ahead throughout. And what is most painful is the realization that you didn't stop them. You allowed them to progress that far solely to confirm your suspicions, solely to observe them incriminate themselves without pressure, accusations, or exposure, only your quiet, deadly knowing. 10th, your insight transcended mere analysis. It was ancestral. Your insight didn't stem from excessive rumination or the connection of superficial dots. It arose from deep ancestral memory. What you experienced wasn't a hunch. It wasn't solely intuition. It was something ancient, something encoded within your spirit before you ever entered the situation. You didn't simply sense that something was amiss. You knew, and that knowing didn't originate with you. It was passed down through generations. Your ancestors have witnessed this before. The betrayal, the manipulation, the charm disguised as benevolent intent. They lived through it, survived it, and now they communicate through you, not with words, but with sudden awareness, with the constriction in your chest when something feels wrong, with the internal alarms that trigger before your conscious mind comprehends the reason. They weren't merely narratives from the past. They were lessons embedded within your bones. And during those moments when you sensed a shift, you were experiencing their collective memory rising to protect you. So dearly beloved, remember this: your ability to discern, to see beyond the surface, isn't just a personality quirk. It's a superpower, a legacy, a divine gift. It's about recognizing the patterns, trusting your intuition, and understanding that sometimes the most powerful action is simply observing with a quiet, knowing heart. Embrace this gift, use it wisely, and always remember that your silence can be a potent force for unveiling truth. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a similar situation where feigning ignorance was your greatest strength? Share your thoughts, your questions, or any insights you've gained in the comments below. Let's learn from each other. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. I'm always sharing insights and perspectives to help you navigate the complexities of life with clarity and grace. You wouldn't want to miss out on our next exploration, would you? Until then, keep shining your light and trust your inner knowing, inner knowing, inner knowing, inner knowing, inner knowing.